Hey everybody, welcome to the Thirsty Fox. We're so happy to have you. Happy holidays to you, and I hope everybody's staying safe at home. So tonight what we're going to talk about is a bourbon and Christmas cookie pairing, so we're really excited for that. And we know that times are tough right now and things are different, and unfortunately you can't maybe be with us here at the restaurant, so what we're going to do is we're going to bring the love to you. So we've got a package and a kit that you guys have picked up from us. Thank you so much for supporting, and looking forward to getting into this tasting with you. So first up, what we're going to do is really just share a fun walkthrough of bourbons and products that we think are going to make a lot of sense to pair with, of course, for this time of year, Christmas cookies. But before we get into that, I've just got a couple of house rules. You guys are at home. You don't have this fancy lineup that we do. You see the products that we're tasting through in the glassware. But what we think would make a lot of sense is to probably have at least 2 clean glasses to try and compare things against at home. Also, as you get into tasting bourbon, anytime that I teach a class, just a couple of pro tips to maximize your experience would be, first off, to look at acclamations. So if you have not had a drink at all tonight, folks, I think it's a good time to maybe take a little bit of sip of the first one before we get into it, and really just, you know, get in there, coat your palate, don't nose it too hard, and just try to coat your mouth. This kind of gets that alcohol coating in your mouth, get your palate kind of ready, you're used to it. So next step would be olfactory. So again, just make sure your system's cleared out, you can smell everything. Flavor isn't just about taste and smell, it's the combination of both. So we want you to be able to smell well, taste well, and when you're kind of nosing the glass, make sure that you start from your chin level. We're going to have a lot of barrel-proof expressions in this tonight, so we want to make sure that you're not burning out your palate. So be slow, be careful as you go in. The 3 things that I always like to speak to when we're going through a tasting like this is going to be nose, palate, and finish. So we're going to walk through that exercise. We may make some comments on the coloring. You'll see some differences there. And then also let's talk a little bit just about how to reset your palate. Now, if we were doing all of the same, say, brand expression, we'd want to reset probably pretty often. These are going to be, what's fun about this, with these being different expressions, they're going to be very unique. But when you reset your palate, I always say reset with your own smell. I know that sounds weird, guys, but if you go to your elbow and just kind of breathe in your own scent in between each expression, that's going to help you kind of differentiate and get a better comparison between as you go along. And then otherwise, while we're tasting these neat tonight, we've got some enthusiasts in the house. Never an expectation. We will have some strong proof expressions, and hey, if you're a barrel strength person, great. But if you want to add water to it, a couple splashes, I always say have that little glass of water handy. If you have an eyedropper at home, or even a straw to take a couple drops and put that in there, that'll help you too. So let's get to the fun part. So our tasting tonight is really going to be tasting through a variety of mash bills. So when we say mash bill in the bourbon world, really in whiskey in general, bourbon mash bills are going to be higher corn, right? So everything in the bourbon realm has to be at least 51% corn. If you go through the rules of what makes a bourbon, all bourbon is whiskey, not all whiskey is bourbon. That's because you're always going to have corn being a part of the bourbon mash bill equation. Now, we have a couple exceptions at the end of this tasting that aren't going to fall in that realm, but we'll speak to that in a little bit. But what we thought would be fun to go along with our Christmas cookie pairing is we're going to take you through different types of mash bills. So we've got a high rye mash bill, we've got a wheated mash bill, we've also got a low rye bourbon mash bill, and then we have a straight rye whiskey, so you can see the difference. Then we have a cream liqueur, because it's Christmas, guys, why not? So that being said, we've got the perfect cookie that we think would be great to pair with each one, and we're going to walk through those one at a time. Can't wait for you to try it. Okay, so first up, we're going to do the old-fashioned cookie, and we're going to pair that one with Old Granddad. Now, Old Granddad is a bottled and bond expression. We'll get into what bottled and bond means here in a minute. But you know, it's made by Beam Suntory. So it's Jim Beam Distillery, 100 proof expression. It's a 4+ year mash bill because it's bottled and bond. Again, we'll get there in a minute. The mash bill, we believe, is about 63% corn, but it is high rye. So that's what makes this one kind of unique and fun. It's 27% rye. and 10% malted barley. And again, in any whiskey, you're normally going to see some malted barley. That's the enzymatic catalyst in the fermentation process. Now, the bottle cost is probably right around $25 plus. Won't break the bank. One of my personal favorites. I know we've got some staff here as well. Their favorite too. Where is the distillery located? Well, it's in Claremont, Kentucky, which is south of Louisville, where Jim Beam is. And Old Granddad Bottle de Bond, it's got a really fun story. So first off, let's just get into Bottle de Bond. What is that? Well, honestly, in 1897, Colonel E.H. Taylor Jr. helped found this Bottle de Bond Act of 1897, and really, in a nutshell, what that did for the industry and for us as consumers as a whole is it's considered really to be the first ever Consumer Protection Act in the United States. So really, before the Pure Food and Drug Act came out, priorities, guys, we decided that our whiskey, we needed to make sure that was right first before we got into food. So you know, what are the rules of Bottle de Bond? Well, Colonel H. Taylor, local guy to Kentucky, we're very familiar with a lot of his products. They felt that these folks that were not doing whiskey service that it should be were basically, you know, adding arsenic and putting really awful things in there. So they were either hawking bad stuff or they were hawking stuff that could potentially kill you, just depending on what was in that bottle. So they thought, hey, we're out here making a living, making great whiskey. Let's put some rules to reason and get the government involved. And we tell them if they can collect some tax off of it, it's a mutually symbiotic thing. And so that stood the test of time for sure. Nowadays, not every product has to be Bottle de Bond for you guys to be safe, but so it's got a lot of great history with it. So what goes into a Bottle de Bond product? Well, it's got to be distilled in the same season. So distilling season could either be January to June or July to December. It has to be at a single distillery. It's got to be bottled, you guessed it, at 100 proof. It's got to be at least 4 years old. The label has to actually identify what distillery makes it, and you can only add water to the product, period. So you can't add anything else. And this was at a time, again, before Prohibition, before actually the rules of bourbon and the Taft Act came through, that you could add a lot of other things than water. So really, really helped out. And one of the identifiers, you don't see it on this bottle, but if you look in the stores, you'll see a tax stamp that kind of represents that bonded tax stamp where a bonded guardsman would make sure that the product going in that bottle that you're buying every day was a really safe, reputable product. Now, fun fact, Old Granddad Bottle de Bond is one of the most best-selling Bottle de Bond products ever. And so it goes all the way back to 1840. The history really goes back to Raymond Hayden. Hayden. And so Hayden really kind of made this product to honor his grandfather, who was a renowned distiller. His name was Basil Hayden Sr. And Basil Hayden, fun fact, is on the front of this bottle right here. Now, if you guys have ever seen Basil Hayden bourbon out there, here's another fun fact. It is the exact same mash bill. So what's unique about this is it's made at Jim Beam. It is a high rye bourbon product, and Beam Suntory actually bought this product somewhere in 1987. It was Future Brands, and then it became a Beam product, and now it's a subsidiary of Beam Suntory. But the good news is you can still find it on shelves today. Incredible product. And let's dig into the cookie piece, because I think that's what we're all here for. So let's give it a try, guys. So on the nose, we'll kind of go in first. I'd recommend just taking a sniff and then maybe a sip before we get into the cookie. I get a lot of just good spice on that, very cinnamony. What do you guys think?
I think it's nice and sweet.
Sweet?
There's a lot of caramel in the back end.
Caramel. Great. And then as far as pairing with the cookie, let's get to it. So the old-fashioned cookie, this is going to be a hint of orange vanilla on the cookie. That's kind of what they were going for with the cookie. And you're going to get a little bit messy, folks, and that is perfectly fine. So while I'm chewing on the cookie, I'm going back to the nose. I already get a little bit more citrus hints on the nose, which is kind of interesting. Wow. It's kind of like a warm blanket. It's like a maple syrup.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you guys are getting?
It balances how sweet that cookie is for sure.
So a good balance between the cookie. Also, I would say I get a little bit more of that oak quality, so I can taste more of the barrel, which is pretty cool. But it doesn't dry out your mouth. Very, very delicious. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I like it, yeah, like you said, the maple syrup almost like pancakes.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So again, that's at 100 proof. If you want to add water to it, you can. But I think that's a really good one. Can't wait for you guys to try it. Now, as far as the next one goes, we are going to walk into Maker's Mark, cast strength. And so with Maker's, it is also a Beam Suntory product. So what's interesting about this one is Maker's is in Loretto, Kentucky. So although it has Beam Suntory as the parent company, different distillery location. A lot of people are very familiar with Maker's Mark. In the 50s, in 1953, that's when Loretto was actually, the campus was founded. And basically, it was at a time where they call it the Great Bourbon Depression. So for Bill Samuel Sr. at the time, really purchased this Burke's Distillery and said, gosh, I want to make a whiskey. But he had a family, they were into the distilling world. T.W. Samuels was a very reputable, well-known whiskey, but they came from an Irish whiskey making background. And Bill Sr., he had a real kind of sensitivity to what we know in the industry as furfural, so very kind of those abrasive aspects of traditional bourbons. And he said, man, I want a softer whiskey. And so he had a lot of good friends at the time that really kind of worked around him, and they said, gosh, you're crazy, Bill. Why would you go and make buy a bourbon distillery and make a whiskey right now? It is not sexy or fun to do that. And he said, I just have, in my heart, I think I want to make a soft whiskey that people can drink. I feel like if I can drink it, others can drink it. And the rest was history. And so in 1954, they actually had the production run of the first wax seal Maker's Mark product. And what was fun is you see this wax seal in this bottle, and even the script of the font on the bottle was actually all devised by his wife, Margie, at the time. She'd locked herself in the room for a week with some paper mache and brought it all together and decided to really make this tagline around bourbon. It tastes expensive and it is logo. Fast forward to today, Bill Jr. And then his son Rob have brought some other products to the table. So you've seen Maker's 46, but most recently you're starting to see these other Maker's expressions come out. So the Lee Initiative just did a community one, so they've done community batches, Maker's 101, but one of my personal favorites is the cast strength product. So this is a barrel strength, 4-year plus Maker's product, and it's a wheated mash bill. So that soft red wheat was what Bill Sr. was originally going for. And so with this product, it's going to be certainly a different take on a traditional recipe. So instead of it being, your normal rye, kind of high rye, low rye distinction, you're going more to a 70% corn, 16% wheat, and then 10% malted barley on this one. So that's enough talking about it. Let's go ahead and get into it and start drinking it. All right, so on the nose you can already see it's a lot more subtle, guys. The other one was a little bit more pronounced. You kind of got to dig into this one a little bit. But I am getting more fruit. What are you guys thinking? Like stone fruit?
It's definitely got a nice bouquet on it. Flowery almost. But it's sweet. It's got like nice heat to it, but it's sweet at the same time. It kind of balances out.
Yeah, and as you get into it, go ahead and taste this one. Oh yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
So to me, it doesn't taste like, from a proof perspective, that it's higher proof. And we didn't really talk about exactly what proof this one is. They're all a little different. This one's 109.6, so it's 9.6 proof higher than this Old Grandad Bonded. But to me, it seems pretty similar.
Yeah, I was about to
Would you
say,
guys say,
taste
or maybe
like-
maybe
It
lower?
doesn't hit like 109 proof.
It's not as hot. I like the stone fruit. I would get that for sure.
Yeah, and I think with this one, definitely we are going to try it with the corn cookie because with Makers being such a high corn, 70% corn, that'll be a fun one. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. That corn cookie's great by itself, that's for sure.
My
What
favorite.
Captain Crunch?
Captain Crunch, I like that. Wow.
I think the cookie neutralizes.
I-
As I say, it
do.
neutralizes that heat.
Yeah.
Does neutralize any heat there. I think it takes some of the oak components away. Makes it more buttery.
Mm-hmm.
You guys get that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oops, all berries.
Yeah, I get more of that butter, and that's a tasting note on the cookie anyway, but I get more, like the butter gets more pronounced with tasting the whiskey. Very
Yeah.
dangerous.
I think the bourbon itself is rich, so it kind of pulls that flavor out.
Yeah.
You know, Guido uses that good butter too.
Do get a little bit of pepper on the back end, but it's not hot.
It's good.
Dissipates quickly. So,
Good pairing.
all right, guys. So the next one up on the list is going to be Booker's Beaten Biscuits. So what the heck does that mean? Well, Booker's, we'll get into the brand history, but Booker's actually has different expressions that they release throughout the year. So this is a 2019 fourth batch expression. So Beaten Biscuits, they like to name them. We'll get into the name here in a minute. But this one does also come from Beam, and so Beam is this product is different in the fact that it's going to come from a different area in the rick house. Obviously, Beam is a huge campus. They, I believe, have some rick houses they built recently that hold over 100,000 barrels. So they really have a lot of choice areas that they can pick to have their products in. So the recipe on this is going to be 75% corn, 13% rye, 12% malted barley. So although that is the traditional Jim Beam, what you're gonna get into what distinctifies this versus other products in the lineup. So this one is in the same location, Jim Beam Distillery, and they don't really openly disclose the mash bill per se, but I think a lot of people have really figured out over time where this falls. So we're classifying it as a low rye, kind of going back to that philosophy again. So we've done high rye, wheated. Now we're getting into the low rye. I will caution you guys before you get into tasting this. This one's going to be probably our highest proof of the evening, so be very careful and wary of walking into this one. So let's talk about Booker's. So Booker's is a brand really didn't really kind of come out until 1988, and when we say Booker's, we're really talking about Booker Noe. Booker Noe was the grandson of Jim Beam himself, and so Booker, for fun, before this was actually released as a product, would pick these kind of cherry batches, so 1,000 cases or less, and give this barrel strength product out to family and friends as a thank you for being in his life. And in 1988, kind of coming off the bourbon depression, we're talking in the 50s, when bourbon wasn't fun, this actually helped put bourbon back on the map. We fast forward to the 1980s. Bourbon's actually starting to come into its own again. Clear spirits aren't as cool as they once were, and that was helped a little bit by Blanton's in 1984 being the first single barrel on the market. Now, single barrel isn't a legal classification, and what we're about to talk about isn't either, but they're the first time we really heard those terms, and we're going to hear a lot more of them as we move forward. So, 1988, Booker's became the first touted small batch bourbon, and so because of that, this product is a very kind of limited run batched product. So we say 1,000 or less. Well, small batch doesn't have any real quantifying aspects. So if you go to craft distiller, it could be 20 barrels or less. With Beam, it's 1,000 barrels or less. So some places will tell you how many barrels are in their small batch, and others will not. Some places will legitimately give you one single barrel when they say a single barrel product, and other places it could be 2 barrels, unfortunately. So little fun fact there. But with this, they developed a recipe that they felt was really, already great. But with how they batched and blended this, they thought, well, this is where all the cherry stuff happens. So why is this unique from Jim Beam? Well, it's because it's actually picked from a certain honey spot in the rick house. So they have the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th floors that they feel like that's where their best product's coming out of. If they want to get a 6 to 8 year product that's batched and just wonderful at barrel strength. So in that 4th, 5th, and 6th floors, what's funny about this product is they actually picked them from all 3 of those floors to get the batch together. So 47% actually came from a 9-story warehouse in warehouse H on the 6th floor, and then 11% came from the 4th floor of a 7-story warehouse in warehouse P, and then 42% of this batch came from the 5th floor of 7-story warehouse P as well. And so what they've done is they've blended all 3 of those. Now, why Beaten Biscuits? I know that was kind of a funny name on the front end. Well, there's a little bit of history around Booker Noe, what he liked to do. So not only did he like to give bourbon to family and friends, he also liked to give country ham to family and friends. And he also felt like, what better to go with country ham than biscuits? And so Beaten Biscuits were typically paired with country ham, another big love of Booker Noe. And they're thin and cracker-like compared to buttermilk biscuits, if you're not aware. And so what kind of makes this fun is he thought that this was a great pairing for the holidays with biscuits, kind of bourbon. So not Booker, of course, but Fred felt that way. And so they've come up with this product as an homage to that. And so they said, definitely recommend try beating your own biscuits when you try this, but we're going to instead pair it with a cookie. But I'd say, hey, do it with a biscuit if you can. So this cookie is going to be our sorghum cookie. And so, gosh, that nose is just sweet with the sorghum cookie in your mouth. What did you guys think before you got into it?
Mapley.
Yeah,
Mapley?
Sure.
When I smelled it, yeah.
The nose on it. You definitely get that heat. The sorghum cookie also helps to kind of dissipate that.
Black cherry raisin, I think. And then this sorghum cookie is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So this is actually made by Kentucky's own rock sorghum.
This cookie was developed by Rona Roberts. He's a good friend of Weeda's and was friends with Weeda's mom. He's a sorghum enthusiast. Loves it.
The cinnamon and sorghum really pair well with the honey.
And the cookie's so chewy.
It's chewy.
The raisiny, yeah, like that.
I was gonna say that's perfect because I think putting the cookie with this one together kind of makes me think of that warm toasty cinnamon roll.
So good.
Do you guys get that, like a cinnamon roll vibe?
Definitely.
It's a lot of fun. Love to get your take. Actually, a fun fact with Booker's, Booker Noe would always recommend, even with Booker's being a barrel strength product, to getting a splash or 2 of water to really open up and explore all of the flavors. So that was his personal recommendation. And now that we're kind of to the halfway point, I want to kind of go back through again. Our first bottle was about $25 retail. Our second bottle, again, very easy, kind of not too hard to find. Our second bottle was around $40 retail. This bottle, though, is going to be around $80. And it's going to be kind of hard to find. Because these are batched expressions, they only come out certain times of the year. You might be able to find this one on the shelf. Really just kind of depends on what your local's holding, but still not super rare. We didn't want to make things that nobody could ever find out of this tasting. So that being said, we're going to walk into our next one, which is going to be our Willet 4-year rye. So we've done a high rye mash bill, we've done a wheated mash bill, we've done a low rye mash bill. Now we're going to walk into a Kentucky straight rye. So what does that mean? Well, you don't have to have corn at all if you're talking about a rye whiskey. And a Kentucky straight rye whiskey means it's got to be made in Kentucky and it's got to be at least 2 years old. Willet does us a step further and they actually tell us that it's a 4-year product. So that's pretty good. And Willet is located in Bardstown, Kentucky. So not too, again, far from Louisville. And this is going to be a 4-year, again, product. And the mash bill is kind of interesting. They blend 2 high rye mash bills, so 74% rye, 51% rye. They do have a little bit of corn in those, so the 74% rye, they actually do 11% corn. In the 51% rye mash bill, they do 34% corn. And then the malted barley, both are 15%. So kind of interesting there. Bottle cost on this is about $55 a bottle. And with Willet, just a little bit of history around this. Willet Distilling was founded in 1936. John Willet was the founder, and he had been the master distiller for Willet and Frank Distillery. Sold off the company completely in 1876 when he fell ill. So his son, though, still decided he wanted to be part of the distilling business. Born in 1883, decided to join a different company. At the time, it was called Max Sellinger and Company Distillery. For about 20 years, he worked there. And at the time, he kind of grew up through the ranks, and he decided to buy a third vested interest in the distillery. And then at some point, he decided, hey, you know what? I want to start my own. So he, with his son, Thompson Willet, who was very well known at that point. And so with that, they used some of John David's original recipes in that mix. Eventually, Lambert decided to sell off his ownership to the other distillery and focus directly on the family one. They have been keeping this a family business ever since. So what was interesting is Thompson was one of the first founders of the Kentucky Distiller Association. Very reputable, well-known, and tied into so many other products in the industry that have been since sold to other distilleries and brands. But nonetheless, his family namesake, Thompson, although being a part of that, his family, the other Willets, have kept this business going over time. And since then, they've been making bourbon in one fashion or another. Now, they originally had to make it for ethanol in the 1970s for the war, and then in 1984, they did kind of move into making more actual bourbon from that point. So, in early 2010, kind of going past that bourbon depression, they had all this stuff sitting on the property, but they stopped kind of making bourbon for a while, bottom line. In 2010, they decided to pick it back up, make their own stuff. They were sourcing beforehand. This is a product of what they were putting together, which was sourcing good bourbon for a long time that had these wax tops. They said, hey, eventually we want to have our own stuff. And so this is their own juice, 4 years old, straight rye whiskey, and signified by the Willet family estate, which they wanted to make sure they had their own personal label on. Willet makes a lot of other products that you might have heard of, Rowan's Creek, Noah's Mill. We're going to have another class on that. But in this one, we are going to pair it with the Woodford cookie. All right, so for this one, going in on the nose, definitely get kind of more of a floral, herb garden spice to it. Rye, the secret with these mash bills is rye is always connotated more with spice, where wheat is connotated more with sweet. But if you go high rye, you can go one of two ways. Normally it's going to be punchy or heavy cinnamon, or it's going to be very floral, herbally, and I would say this is more on that floral herbaceous kind of spectrum. So the nose on this, yeah, I mean, it's just that gardeny. I mean, it's like really refreshing, crisp, acidic palate. Not too spicy, very easy. Kind of definitely a step down from heat from our previous one. Although the last one wasn't that hot, this one is, again, it's 113.2 proof, so about 10 proof lower. And then as we look at the pairing with the cookie, this cookie is dark cocoa, dried cranberry, toasted pecan on a tasting note. Rolled oats and chocolate chips, you can't beat that.
Yeah. I was about to say, you can really taste that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because when I try this cookie with the rye, it brings out a lot more of the baking spices. So we're talking about cinnamon and nutmeg.
And the tartness of the cranberry.
Yeah. It's almost got like this Cocoa Puff thing happening
Yeah,
there.
so it's in the chocolatey.
You got me on the cereal kick.
I
Yeah,
know,
yeah. It kind of puts you in a frame of mind, and the right frame of mind, you know?
This would be
It
a good
does.
way to start your day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this would be a good breakfast of champions. And that is a great segue into our final product. So this is one that we just couldn't get away from. We actually did this last year with our cookie pairing, but we think, I mean, man, of all things that you can pair cookies with, why not a bourbon cream? And there's a lot of them out there, but we absolutely love here Buffalo Trace Bourbon Cream. And a fun fact about Buffalo Trace Bourbon Cream, obviously it's not a bourbon, it's not a rye, it's a liqueur. And you can thank the monks, I think it goes all the way back to the 1400s, that decided that they would make a liqueur for medicinal reasons to try to help people with ailments. So fast forward to today, that's why liqueurs exist, you're welcome. So with that, the Buffalo Trace Bourbon Cream, what's interesting about this one is Buffalo Trace as a product comes from Sazerac, who makes the hallowed Pappy Van Winkle, all these other products we know, Eagle Rare Blanton's, but Buffalo Trace as a product didn't really come to surface until 1999. They rebranded George T. Stagg Distillery to Buffalo Trace Distillery. Folks, I tried to figure out when exactly this released as a product. I can tell you it was limited, and it's still limited today, but it was only available at the gift shop for a long time, and it actually won its first award in 2015. So sometime between 1999 and 2015, for reference, I believe it's probably around 2011 when this first came out. Don't quote me on that. And what's interesting about this versus other shelf-stable bourbon cream liqueur products or whiskey liqueur products is that it uses real New York cream. So this does have Buffalo Trace bourbon in it, but it is a very, very low proof amount of that. So it's a mixture of that cream and the Buffalo Trace bourbon. It's 15% ABV, so 30 proof. We think the Buffalo Trace bourbon cream pairs the best with the toffee cookie, the toffee crisp. So, so the toffee crisp, before we get into it, cheers guys. Taste this bourbon cream by itself. We were talking about starting your day right. This is good to add to coffee. This is good to add to cocoa, maybe cereal. We were talking a lot about cereal. Add it to your cereal. Nobody's gonna judge you.
Root beer.
Root beer floats, absolutely. Let's get into the cookie. So on this, I mean, really, it's kind of a more delicious version of a Bailey's.
It's like having Christmas.
It doesn't have that. There's some kind of like astringent factor to Bailey's, I think, where this is just smooth all the way
Smooth,
through.
yeah.
It's my guiltiest pleasure.
It is just straight, yeah. It's
I always
just like
have a bottle around the
Yeah.
holidays for coffee.
there's the
It's my
slightest,
guiltiest
like,
pleasure.
that slightest, you know, oakiness of bourbon right in the back, right at the very back, but it's so smooth and creamy, and then with the cookie, it's just like,
It's sweet, but it's not like coinly sweet.
And it's
yeah, exactly.
definitely better than Bailey's.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It's
And
better than all those.
yeah, it really is.
so I consider this to be kind of like adult chocolate milk.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try it with this toffee crisp. And I have not tried this cookie before. And holy crap, is that good. It does have some interesting, like, earthy.
They taste
Tones to it?
alike. I feel like
You think they're
they taste alike.
pretty, yeah, so
yeah, that's what the.
you think about
flavors-
contrast and
flavors go
resonance,
so well
these
together.
probably resonate better than contrast each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a hard time differentiating the two, to be honest.
I think if I bathed my cookie in this,
Oh yeah. You probably should.
Cookie crisp.
There you go. See, we just stick to the cereal thing. We'll say cool.
I like it.
Double the bird here.
That's magic, folks. Definitely recommend dipping your cookie in it. Maybe a separate container if you don't want to use your whole ounce for it, but yeah, that's pretty good. Actually, I like it better dipped. I like my cookie better dipped in this.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, what wouldn't this make
Let's just go
better?
around.
All right, so again, this is a liqueur. So guys, versus some of the other expressions we've done, high rye, low rye, wheated. We've dunked cookies. I mean, which one do you guys like the best, or which one do you think
I like
was
the corn cookie and
The makers.
the makers?
Maker's the best.
Okay.
So I was a real big fan of the sorghum and the
Me
Booker's.
too. I was surprised by that one.
Yeah, me too. Because
I've never had
Booker's
Booker's
is
in
typically
so
too
long.
much.
Well, and because we're doing this via YouTube, guys, and we can't interact with you, we would love for you all to comment down below. Once you go through this tasting and you unpack it in whatever time frame that you can, please tell us, you know, what you thought, which ones you liked the most, which ones you didn't like. We'd love to get your feedback there for sure. And I think that's it. So that's going to wrap up our tasting for tonight, guys. We really appreciate you tagging along with us on this one. 2021, we're hopeful that we can get together and have more of these in-person classes with you, because these are a ton of fun, and we've got a lot of great things going on with the Bourbon Club. We've got a private barrel selection for the Thirsty Fox Bourbon Club members that are going to roll out. Our hope is, fingers crossed, with coronavirus, you know, putting a question mark on everything these days, we're thinking February potentially for that. For an Old Forester barrel strength pick, which we know a lot of people are really excited about that. So we're excited for you. And then otherwise, it's the end of the year, guys. We know it's been a tough year. You know, looking forward to 2021. From our family to yours, happy holidays. And thanks for drinking. Drink more bourbon. Cheers.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.